Welcome, Boris. Thank you for being a part of the series. I'm really excited to dive into some stuff. I think this will be a little bit more of a relaxed episode since we've kind of chatted lots in the past, and this one will be a little less structured.
Yeah.
So Boris is the owner of a local cleaning company called WestMaids. You have some other projects on the go. You have a background in a driving school, and you're originally from Bosnia and Croatia and a bunch of random places.
Essentially, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what WestMaids does to start.
So, yeah, pretty straightforward. WestMaids is a cleaning company, hence the name. That was kind of part of the brand, is just to be very clear in what we do, just because we were starting out. And the whole idea was to try and modernize an industry that is basically a customer service industry, but that hasn't really changed in essentially ever. And we basically just built it so that it was easy for the clients to work with us. So instead of, having to call us for a price or, get a walkthrough in some cases for a price, they can just go right online, put in their house details. And as long as, they're being truthful about the size and the state of their house, they'll get basically a 100% accurate quote in most cases. So that's kind of the idea behind WestMaids there.
So I want to really dive into the coming to Canada, immigrant, refugee family thing.
Yeah.
So where did your life start?
So it started in Bosnia, in one of the major northern towns called Banja Luka. And long story short, I was born in 1990, right around when the war of Yugoslavia kind of broke out. And so by 92, we were in Croatia, in the capital of Zagreb. And basically, it's really complicated, as you probably know, with the whole Serbian-Croatian aspect. So my family's pretty mixed. And so we couldn't just leave as easy as we thought we could. So we actually had to go to Serbia, capital Belgrade. Went down to Macedonia and my dad's friends. And then basically my uncle smuggled us into Croatia from Hungary. So according to him, he smuggled us in. I don't know how true that is, but eventually we settled in the capital, Zagreb, and we stayed there until 1996, until we got official refugee status in Canada. And we came here June 1996, and I've been here since then. So I'm happy to be here.
Cool. You still go back to Europe fairly often, hey?
I do now, yeah, now that I'm older and I can actually pay for my own trips. That was kind of a struggle when we first arrived, obviously being, not only immigrants, but refugees. We had essentially nothing. Everything we had was that the government gave us just to have some sort of semblance of, being established. So they basically put us up in an apartment and gave us very basic furniture. And so for the first 12 years, we didn't go back at all. So it was quite hard for my family to, not see the rest of our family for over a decade. And so now that I can actually do that on my own, I do make sure to go back at least once a year, especially with grandparents and, being older, stuff like that. So
great. And you come from a bit of an entrepreneurial family. Your dad started a driving school.
That's right.
How did that get started?
Yeah, so the driving school just kind of happened in your standard, business story. He worked for a very large company in Alberta, who everybody probably knows. And he just got tired of, putting in all this effort for the clients and trying to really make an impact in these people's lives, and, management not really caring as much as he did. So eventually he just got tired of it. And I started just to come up with his own idea for a school. And he eventually just made that jump. And it's been over 12 years now that he's been doing that.
How far into it did you start getting involved in the driving school?
Yeah, so super late, actually. Probably after it was like 9 or 10 years old is when I got involved. And it was kind of funny because as I was growing up and in high school, my dad was always like, "Oh, I want you, get your license and become an instructor." And I was always like, "No, I don't want to be an instructor. I don't want to, teach people how to drive." So it's kind of funny that I came back to it as an adult.
So when you came back to the driving school as an adult, what brought you back into it? What got you involved?
Alberta's economy at the time. I was in school for biology, and all the work that I did as a student was in environmental science. And once the economy kind of slowed down a little bit, my summer job disappeared. There was no jobs at all that year. And so my dad said, "Well, hey, why don't you help me out for the summer before my last year, and just so I'm doing something." And so I said, "Sure, why not?" So I jumped into the business, and that's kind of where I got my start with that.
How did you transition from that to starting WestMaids? Did you do anything between those two?
No, so it was a direct transition. And basically how that came about is that my dad is an amazing, amazing teacher when it comes to actually working with people directly.
Mm-hmm.
Super charismatic. What he's not so good at is the business aspect. So I figured, well, why don't I try to learn how to do business stuff and help him out? So I just got reading, and I came across a Facebook group where it was basically a whole bunch of cleaning company owners. So I figured, hey, I could learn from these guys. They run, a similar kind of service-focused business. And I just got reading. And basically through reading all these guys' operations and their business and how they ran things, I basically got the layout for how to start a cleaning company.
Cool.
And then one day we just decided that, nowadays it's so easy to get a website up and running, and you can do so much with social media and Google that the startup costs are pretty minimal. So we just said, not really missing out on a job right now because the economy still wasn't doing well. So we just went for it.
Cool. And it seems like it's been quite successful. Part of the reason that I'm excited to do this interview is because you built your business primarily, almost exclusively on digital marketing.
That's right.
Which is really cool. So being part of that group on Facebook was a big thing for a lot of those other companies, the SEO, or for people who don't know, search engine optimization. So where you show up on Google. Was that a big factor in a lot of those cleaning companies' success?
Yes. That was more of a step two, though. Step one in kind of getting that foothold is more so focusing on Yelp and Google My Business, as they call it. Mm-hmm. Which so Google My Business is when you search, for example, Calgary cleaning companies, you get the little map and it'll show you a couple businesses. That's that specific part of Google. And
so your places listing.
Yes, and the reason that's important when you're starting out is that even if you don't have the authority to rank over more established sites, if you're closer to the searcher by proximity, Google will actually show your company to them anyways. Mm-hmm. So that was a good way to get the initial customers. But I mean, eventually everybody kind of goes to the SEO just because the reach is so much bigger. So it's absolutely key, but it's kind of step two in that digital process.
So when you're starting out then, I know in the Google Places listing, ratings and reviews play a really big factor in that. So did you do something to try and get as many reviews as you could?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we basically did contests for free cleans, and we hoped that the cleans would go well enough that then they'd be incentivized to leave us a review. So that was kind of an easy way to generate some of that traffic when starting out. But part of the actual booking system is there is an automated follow-up function. So not only do we check in with every single person after each clean, just saying, hey, how was it? How did it go? Any comments, good, bad, whatever. If they're happy, they'll get a second email saying, hey, do you mind taking a minute to leave us a Google review with a link to the actual place they can do that. Mm-hmm. And so that helps as well.
How did you go? Did you learn SEO for yourself? Did you develop your own strategies for that?
I would say, yeah. Learning sounds a lot more organized than what it actually was. It's a lot of stumbling through different ideas about SEO and different things people have tried, because Google's always changing the algorithm, and the local SEO totally varies from more national or international SEO. So you can do different things that impact the local. And we basically, just, started reading about it. There's lots of information out there. Started looking at what other companies were doing, and then basically just kind of plucked away at it until we started seeing results.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, yeah.
About how long ago did you start doing SEO?
So we started right away because we knew the impact it has in general. Because obviously growing up, this generation that anything you need, you go to Google, you search it, and you just find the thing on the first page, right? So we knew the importance, so we got on that right away. But it took about 7-8 months to really get onto the first page of Google.
Yeah.
So it definitely, is a long-term kind of thing you do. Yeah. And that was part of the reason we started so early as well, just to kind of get the ball rolling on the SEO.
Yeah, well, it's cool. You have a lot of these older businesses that don't really realize the potential there, the value there. Mm-hmm. I know for me, when I started out doing video production in Lethbridge, it was one of the first things I did was try and get ranked on Google, and that happened really quickly in Lethbridge. And then coming to Calgary, worked on that again. And I think I hired 3 different SEO companies, and none of them really provided the results of the reporting that I wanted. And I spent a bunch of time learning myself, like you did.
Right.
And for a little while, we were ranked number 2 for video production in Calgary, which was really cool. But then it got really competitive, and a bunch of the bigger companies started targeting the SEO and getting backlinks. And I think now we're float between page 1 and page 2, but it's probably accounted for about 40% of my business, I think, which has been cool. And kind of once I got really frustrated with hiring SEO companies that weren't performing, I hired a guy in Lethbridge who he has a PhD in neuroscience, so really smart, works for the university there, and he just really dived in and learned the really finer points of SEO, like where to get backlinks and what kind of citations you need, and all that kind of stuff, and the on-site stuff and meta tagging and all that, and then we started offering it to our clients, and we actually, one of our clients, we managed to rank number 4 in the US, which was really, really cool.
That's
I
awesome,
didn't expect that to happen.
And that's how SEO goes, right? You just pluck away at it, and then one day you wake up to that email where it's like, hey, you're on page 1. You're like, oh, okay, well,
it's always a good sign.
Wow, is it true, right? But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a process, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to learn as well, because a lot of these guys, charge $1,000 to $2,000 starting a month, and it's kind of a scammy industry.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because it's so technical, and if you don't know what you're looking at, people can promise you anything, and you have no idea whether that's realistic or even true. Some of these guys will tell you you're going to be first place on Google, and then they just buy Google AdWords, right? So it's definitely kind of a tricky industry, and that was definitely part of the reason why I wanted to get educated, right?
Yeah.
Just because it's still developing, I would say, and so it's always a work in progress.
There's a lot of companies, I'm really surprised they don't do any sort of reporting. You don't get anything back. You have no idea what they're doing. They're just like, oh yeah, no, it's going good, and you're like, I'm not seeing any changes. You're not giving me any reports. I think companies should always have reports showing you what they're doing and how you're progressing and stuff like that, for that level of accountability. Because there are so many bad SEO companies, so many that'll take advantage of you. You'll just pay them monthly and for nothing. It's a scary industry.
It is, yeah, and I think a lot of them, that's their plan, right? They might get just a handful of clients that each pay $1,000. You might make $5,000-$6,000 a month doing nothing. You might lose a client or 2 eventually. We just find another couple, and I just keep doing it, right? So yeah, you're right. Reporting is key, but it's that education, right? Because if you don't know what you're looking for, even if that you need to get reports, it's very easy to get taken advantage of. So it's a bit of a shady industry, but it's so key in growing your business locally, especially.
What percentage of your business would you say comes from search, like Google and Yelp and stuff?
So Google search alone, I'd say, is probably over 90%.
Wow.
I'd say 90% for sure. And then the rest is probably just Yelp and that Google My Business listing, which technically is different from the organic listing. Other than that, it's so hard nowadays with Facebook because they keep reducing the amount of views that you get from your subscribers unless you pay for ads. So I would say that's kind of the three big ones. So 90% regular Google search, and then 10% Yelp, as well as that Google My Business marker.
Very cool. What were some early on struggles you had in your business? What were some things that were difficult to overcome?
Yeah. So not super difficult to overcome, but pricing we were not sure about in the beginning. Obviously, didn't come from working at a cleaning company or working cleaning as an employer being paid for in general. So we just kind of looked up pricing around us. We said, okay, that looks good. Toss it up there. But as we had some bookings, we would kind of compare the pricing and the money we made to the time spent. And we realized that it was a little bit off for certain houses. So we just refined it. We said, okay, well, this house took, for example, 5 hours, and we want to maintain this kind of earning per hour. So we just adjusted that pricing. So that was pretty easy. The hardest part, and even still now, is not so much getting clients, but finding the right cleaners. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty standard in any industry. It's very hard to find those top performers consistently. And we basically just had to learn what to look for in people, how to screen for the right characteristics, and just really make sure that we were taking our time in hiring people. Because the biggest issues we had were with cleaners that were not performing, because they would either not do a good job or do something correctly, and now you have to deal with the clients being mad or upset or sad in some cases, depending on context. And then in some cases you lose money, right? Because you got to refund it, or whatever the case may be. So that was kind of a struggle to figure out. Took a few months to really kind of nail it down. And it's an ongoing struggle. Yeah. Because you might meet someone, you run them through their process, they look good, but you don't actually know until they've worked with you for a while, right?
So what do you do to make the clients happy when they've had a bad experience?
Yeah, so first of all, we just listen to them. I think most unhappy customers just want to be heard, right? They want to know that you actually care as someone who's taken their money. So that's always step number one, right? Is just hear them out. Like, what's going on? Like, how are you feeling? What happens? And then we just work with them to resolve it. And often it's just something like, they expected a little more detail, for example, the kitchen. So we'll just send somebody back, right? And that's our guarantee, is that if you're not happy, we'll come back and make it right. And in most cases, that's all they want, right? They're pretty reasonable people in general. In some cases where we can't go back, we'll refund, the percentage for whatever was missed. But that pretty much covers most people. It's usually minor stuff, because especially now we have pretty high standards for the people we work with. So that's kind of the process we have now in place.
And we've chatted in the past, and you've, in a very short period of time, like, your business hasn't been around that long in the grand aspect of things. Yeah. You've managed to not be the main pillar of the work in the business. You pretty much just work on the business, and you don't really have to put in a ton of hours either. You've kind of built a income support stream there without a lot of work. How did you go about kind of not being the main person working in the business?
Yeah, so no, that's a good question, because that's kind of the key. A lot of people start businesses and then they get stuck in actually operating the business, and it's very hard to make that jump. So I guess I was kind of lucky in the fact that so at the driving school, I wasn't actually getting paid, because when I tell people it's my dad's company, they're like, oh yeah, your dad gave you a company. It's like, well, no, it's actually quite small, and still is quite small. So there wasn't money to pay me. So all the money I started earning from WestMaids myself was basically ground zero, right? So I wasn't used to having this income. And so basically what we did is that as soon as we could, we had someone else that was being paid to handle the operations. And so it wasn't like I had to trade, a bunch of money I was earning to now pay somebody else, because I never had that money in the first place, right? And I think that's a struggle with people that try to make that jump, because they're like, well, now I have to, lose a full-time wage in order for someone else to operate it.
Right.
So I was lucky in the fact that I had no money. So I had no money to lose. But basically what happened is we had a cleaner that was working for us, and at home, not on the job, she fell and broke her ankle. And so she was like, guys, I'm out for 4 months. So we're like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what else to tell you, right? You can't work. She had a cast for most of the time. She had a little scooter that they sometimes have when you have the broken
Yeah.
leg. So she couldn't clean. And so my partner and I sat down. We were like, well, why don't we ease her into operating the company?
Mm-hmm.
She has 2 kids, really young. And with this, she can stay at home with them. Like, we didn't have an office she had to go to. She just has to answer calls and answer emails as they come in, right?
Yeah.
And basically, we just started her off at very few hours per week, just to kind of ease her into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, same kind of a deal for her is that she couldn't work full time anymore. So any money we were paying her to operate the company was more than she would make anyways, right? So she was like, okay, I'll start at whatever you got. And then as the company grew, her hours also increased. And then it's just at a point where she's doing the full-time operations now.
Cool.
So it kind of was a bad situation that happened at a good time, I guess. And now it's a great situation for everybody.
That's awesome. So now that the company, for the most part, except for maybe the last month, has been running really smoothly, what's next for you? Are you going to try and expand this company, or you always have entrepreneurial ideas? You want to do stuff.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about currently?
Well, I think the main goal is to expand WestMaids itself. It's much easier to expand when you have something that's already operating rather than starting something else. So we're looking at possibly expanding to a different city, like say Edmonton, for example, or adding a complementary service, like for example, window cleaning.
Right.
Because we have an existing base that probably already uses that service. So we can just email everybody and say, hey, we have a new service. Sign up and use it. And most of them will probably say, yeah, sure, if that's something they're paying for anyways, right? So we're trying to figure out what's kind of the best course of action, because anything that we decide to do is going to have to be the focus, right? So if we decide to expand Edmonton, we can't, halfway through the month drop that and say, oh, actually, we want to look at doing windows instead. So we just have to decide what we're actually going to commit to and then just run with that. As far as other businesses, I always have something on the back burner. I've thought about running like a tour company in Croatia.
Oh, cool.
Everybody wants to go to Croatia nowadays, right? Ever since Game of Thrones kind of made it the highlight, it's been super, super touristy. And I figure, I'm from there. I can speak the language. I have family connections. I have friend connections over there. Why not give that a shot? But that's a little more high stakes, because not only is it not a local service business, which is kind of my realm of expertise, it's across the globe, right?
Yeah.
So how do I run a business that's 8 hours away in time zone difference, right? So it's a little more complicated
Yeah, for sure.
in terms of operations there, but I mean, we'll see.
Do you think being an immigrant or being from an immigrant family has an effect on your work ethic?
I would say yes and no. Long term, yes, but since I basically grew up Canadian, essentially, I came here when I was very young. I didn't really see the struggle my parents went through until I was older, and so I didn't really appreciate what they went through and how much effort they put through it. And so for a lot of my time as a kid, I was actually pretty lazy. I was okay in school, but anytime it was like a harder assignment or a class, I would kind of just coast by and be like, oh, whatever. So it actually took a while to build up that work ethic. And it's only been the last few years that I've really seen how much my parents went through and how much they suffered to get to where they are and the work that's gone into it. Where it's really kind of clicked and been like, all the suffering they've gone through can't be for vain, right?
Yeah.
Like if I just do nothing with my life, that's an insult to them, right? Because they lost everything when we moved here to start a new life. Especially, it was to give me that opportunity, right? So they did it all for me. So for me to not take advantage of that, I think would be quite shameful, for sure.
What did your parents have to go through to? What did they have to build when they came here? What did they build?
Yeah, I mean, so we basically came with nothing. We had the government gave us, I think they paid for a year of rent. So back in the day, that was like $500 in downtown Calgary a month. And they gave us a kind of like a starting living room set. to set us up. And so I remember as a kid, every single weekend we would go to different garage sales looking for free or really cheap stuff to add to our house. And I didn't get it. I got annoyed. I was like, why are we going, around places every single weekend? I just want to play with friends or play video games or whatever. But that was them trying to establish this kind of foundation for just trying to integrate, right? Like they needed a functional home to do anything.
Yeah.
But other than that, they had to basically redo Canadian high school. I'm not sure how it works, but their credentials aren't exactly accepted over here. So they basically had to do essentially like grade 12 and then write a diploma and pass it. So they had to redo that. My mom knew English, my dad didn't. So he learned English in the meantime. He was also working as a snow removal guy. So he was getting up at like 3, 4 in the morning, first Canadian winter, having to go clean snow. And so for them overall, it was just super uncomfortable, super tiring. And it took a long time for them to actually become established. And that's kind of what I look at, right? It's like you just have to grind it out.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of what you're doing, you just can't stop. You got to move on, right?
Yeah, it's cool that you have that appreciation now for their hard work, and I'm sure they appreciate that.
I mean, I hope so. They say they're proud and whatever, right? But it took a while for it to really click, just because I didn't get it as a kid, right? So
yeah, I don't think most kids do.
I don't think so. Yeah.
So what advice do you have for people who are ready to start a business? What are the first steps? What does that look like? What does the foundation look like?
Yeah. Well, step number 1 is start working through the idea. So I've had so many great ideas that were not great ideas. I quickly found out. And now it's because I was like, oh, wow, like this would be so awesome. But then I started looking into, the market or how it operates or what I have to do to set it up, and quickly realized that I just didn't have the skills or, the feasibility to do it. So that's step number 1, because a lot of people are like, oh, I have this great idea, but then that's it, right? So start there. I guess part of that is pick an industry that already has competition, because a lot of people see competition as a negative, but competition tells you there's a market, right? So if you think of an idea and you're like, wow, no one's doing this, and you think it's super innovative, well, it could be that there just isn't the market to support it, right? So especially if it's your first business, I think that's a bit risky, because you may not have the experience to actually realize that. So pick something that has competition. And that's what everybody told me. They're like, why are you doing cleaning? Like, everybody does cleaning. And I said, yeah, I know, right? Like, that's the point. And then nowadays, it's so important to have a good brand. So we spent, I don't know how many hours coming up with the name WestMaids, right? Basically, we had to have a name that had what we do in the title, because we didn't want people thinking, well, like, what does this company do? Like, as soon as you hear WestMaids, you probably assume we do cleaning, right? And that's half the battle, right, is brand recognition. And then you don't have to necessarily get a logo, but if you do, don't cheap out on it. Because that'll look a lot worse than not even having a logo. One of the best pieces of advice I heard is that when you're first starting out, just find a really nice font and just write your name out. And just have that as your logo, because that'll look way better than if you pay someone on $5 or $25 you get a rush for a week to do a templated logo that looks like garbage, right? So I see this all the time in the cleaning groups I'm part of on Facebook. People will be like, oh, how does this look? And it'll just be like clip art. And I'm like, I hope you didn't pay for this. Like, it looks like garbage and it doesn't do anything for your brand. It doesn't say anything about your company, right?
We were gonna do a logo for a dentist. It's not like dentists don't have money. Like, this is a well-established, successful dentist.
Right.
And he's like, no, I don't want to pay like hundreds. It was less than $1,000 we quoted him. He's like, I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars. I can get it for $100 at Costco. Like, Costco does logos. Didn't end well.
And that's the thing, right? Like, people, especially when you're starting out, like $200-$300 can be a lot, but you have to have that foundation, right?
Well, your brand is like really the one thing that sets your business apart beyond all else. Like, it's the one thing you truly own.
And that's exactly it. Like, once again, you're entering on purpose a competitive market because that means there is a market.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you stand out, right?
Yeah.
And that brand is kind of step number one. You need something that's going to not necessarily be memorable, but when
Mhm.
someone's looking, it has to look professional, right?
Yeah.
And then that helps you look like a bigger company too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people
Builds
don't want to.
trust.
Exactly, that's part of it is the trust. So some people don't want to work with, a 1 or 2 man operation because there's certain liabilities that could be a part of that. So if you can do things that really set yourself up to look like an established company, that'll go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And then that'll let you charge higher prices too. Not saying that you want to gouge customers, but we found that the people that are looking for the lowest price are usually the most difficult to work with as well, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't value that service.
Oh yeah.
So if you can charge a higher price, target the demographic that actually values that service, you'll have much better clients and you'll do less work for the same amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then closely linked to that is don't cheap out on a website.
Yeah.
So again, in the groups, I see people, asking where do I build a website? And people will say, oh, just like go on Wix or even Vistaprint, like do it yourself. It's easy.
Yeah.
And then I look at them and half the time they don't load on my phone, right?
Mm-hmm. If people do have a very limited budget and time constraint,
Yeah.
Squarespace is actually pretty good for one
Yeah.
of those build your own, and like out of the box, like the SEO is decent, unlike Wix and the other ones.
Yeah, so Squarespace is a little better than Wix. The issue with Wix is that, in terms of SEO, like it's not good at all. There's issues with what's called like Google indexing, and basically Google was totally ignoring these websites because they were just so poorly built on the back end for the code. So Squarespace is a good alternative, but even then I would say try and
compared to WordPress.
try and get off Squarespace as soon as you can. Because it's not as flexible for SEO, and so technically you could rank it, but it'll be much easier on something like WordPress. And there is actually services where you'll pay a little more per month, like let's say $50 to $70 a month, but you're not paying the $2,000 to $3,000 up front for a website, right?
Right.
So it's much more accessible to get a proper looking website. And so that's kind of the key, right? Is like establish a brand from the beginning that's going to look good so that your customers value what you're doing, and then just make sure you do a good job.
Yeah. The value of brand is so huge because really anybody can do good cleans, right? Anybody can provide customer service. Not everybody does.
Right.
But those things can all be a level playing field. But building a good brand and a unique brand is really what can differentiate you in any industry, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, a lot of companies, like it's the brand that sells, not the product, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody goes to Starbucks to get a coffee. They go because they want, the latest crazy frappuccino they've come up with for Halloween, or pumpkin spice lattes of their own have become kind of like a social phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
And that's that brand.
Yeah.
So it's if you can establish an amazing brand, it'll go so far for your business.
Well, you really see that in clothing, like 100 times markup on a shirt just because of the brand that's printed on it, right? It's made in the same factory.
That's exactly it. And then people will buy clothing just to show off it's whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or like you'll see people, I don't know, they buy a jacket and they're like, oh, it's Prada, right?
Yeah.
Like, so they're literally just talking about the brand of the company, right? Like they almost don't care about the products.
No.
They care about the brand it came from, right? So it's so powerful, and a lot of companies just don't understand that. And so if you can establish that brand, you'll get ahead of a lot of people, I would say.
Do you think that inclination towards branding, at least in small business, is more of a newer, younger generation thing, more so than an old school thing? Do you think that shift is happening in that direction?
I would say so, yeah. Especially because back in the day, like pre-internet, information was very, very localized. And so even like within the same city, like if you had a small company, it was very unlikely that you'd be seen across the entire city, right? For example, like if you're a plumber, you might have one van, and then you might have your couple clients, and if someone sees you driving around or whatever, that's it, right? But with Facebook and Google and AdWords and all that, you can pay $10, $15 and show 20,000 people your brand, right? And so that's kind of where that differentiation comes from, is because it's so visible nowadays that if you don't have that brand, it's very hard to stand out from all those other brands. And so I think people have realized that, since everybody can see you almost at all times nowadays, you have to have that little bit of edge, right?
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to watch the expansion of WestMaids and see what other ventures you start up. And if you ever start a tourism company in Croatia, I'll definitely come hang out over there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, and thanks for having me on. I know you've had some awesome guests, so it's a pleasure to be a part of that group.
Yeah,
so thank you. Appreciate it.
It's been great having you. I'm excited to share this information. So
thank you.
Thank you. Our first sponsor is Syndication, which is a video production company that I started. We do video production and online marketing for businesses of all sizes, ranging from solopreneurs to Fortune 500 companies. Our second sponsor is Gravity Cafe. They've been gracious enough to give us their space. The coffee's awesome. They have live music 3 nights a week. The beer's great. It's an awesome place to come hang out. Another sponsor of the Ambition Project is BusinessLink. BusinessLink is Alberta's entrepreneurial hub. They are a nonprofit organization that helps people navigate the steps towards starting their own businesses. Just because you're in business for yourself doesn't mean you're in business by yourself. BusinessLink's team of in-house startup experts are there to support you all along the way. Our next sponsor is the Better Business Bureau. Your BBB helps businesses build visibility, credibility, savings, leads, and community through BBB accreditation while funding free marketplace services with more than 1 million instances of service to consumers every year. Visit bbb.org/Calgary to learn more today.